My name is Fiona Sellers. I'm 67 years old, and for 35 years, I built a $12 million construction company that everyone, including my own children, called my husband's. When Gerald left me for his secretary, my oldest son, Craig, said something I will carry to my grave. He sat at my kitchen table, looked me in the eye, and said, "Just don't make it messy, Mom. Dad has the money." Dad has the money. 4 words, 35 years erased. Here's the thing Craig didn't bother to check. None of them did. I had already hired an attorney 6 months before Gerald packed his bags. I'd found the receipts, I'd read the contracts. And what happened that Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock when 60 employees opened their payroll email? Well, by Monday morning, Gerald couldn't make a single phone call that didn't end in silence. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories. This is the channel where mothers tell their stories, the ones that took years to understand and minutes to change everything. If you're new here, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what Fiona does next. I met Gerald in 1989. I was a corporate accountant at a mid-sized firm in Richmond. He was a project foreman who poured foundations and told everyone at the bar he was going to own a company someday. Gerald had the charm. I had the numbers. He had the handshake. I had the credit score. When he said he wanted to start a construction company, I was the one who sat at the dining room table for 3 weeks writing the business plan. I was the one who walked into First National Bank and convinced a loan officer to approve $2 secured against my personal credit, my savings, my retirement account. Gerald wasn't at that meeting. He was at a job site. I drafted the LLC operating agreement myself, 32 pages. I gave myself 60% ownership because I was the one carrying every dollar of financial risk. Gerald got 40. He signed it on a Tuesday afternoon, didn't read it. Said, "If you wrote it, Fee, it's fine." I put that operating agreement in the bottom drawer of the tan metal filing cabinet in our home office. It's been there for 35 years. Nobody ever opened that drawer except me. Over the decades, a story took shape. Gerald was the builder. Gerald was the face. Gerald shook hands and went to job sites and posed for photos at ribbon cuttings. I did everything else. Finances, contracts, bonding, compliance. Payroll, insurance, hiring. Everything that kept the lights on. His mother, Brenda, made it gospel. At every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every company event. My Gerald built that company from nothing. Fiona does the paperwork. I should have paid attention to who was reading the documents I wrote. Nobody was, and I should have corrected the story, but I thought love meant they'd notice on their own. They didn't. 6 months ago, October, I was doing what I always do at the end of every quarter, reviewing the company books line by line the way I've done since 1994. Page 14 of the expense report, a line item consultant fees, Rowan Creative Solutions, $13,400 monthly for 14 months running. I didn't recognize the name. Rowan Creative Solutions, LLC, registered in Virginia, 8 months after Tiffany Rowan was hired as our secretary. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Ruth Callahan, a divorce attorney in Richmond who specializes in business ownership disputes, $450 an hour. I paid the retainer that afternoon. I didn't confront Gerald. I didn't cry. I went to the grocery store. I made pot roast. I set the table for 2 and waited for him to come home and lie to my face, which he did because that's what Gerald does best when he thinks nobody is checking. Fast forward to April. Gerald sat me down in the living room, still wearing his golf shirt from the club, and said, "Fiona, I deserve to be happy. Tiffany believes in me. I want a divorce." I said, "I understand, Gerald." He stared at me. I think he expected tears or begging or a plate thrown at the wall. He got a woman rinsing her coffee mug and setting it on the drying rack. Craig came by that evening. My own son, 35 years old, VP of sales at the company I built, sat at my kitchen table and said it. "Just don't make it messy, Mom. Dad has the money." I dried my hands on the dish towel. I folded it. I set it on the counter and I said nothing. Gerald moved fast. Within a week, he was living in the company's model home with Tiffany. New sheets, new towels, a bottle of champagne on the counter, charged to the company card. Craig organized a family meeting at his house, invited Gerald, invited Nora, our younger daughter. Did not invite me. Nora called me afterwards. She was careful. Mom, I love you both, but Craig says we need to think about the business. I told her I understood. I did understand. I understood exactly what was happening. Gerald's attorney sent the divorce, filing the following Monday. The demands read like fiction. The house 50% of his company and spousal support from me, claiming I had earned less throughout the marriage. Gerald signed the filing with his gold pen, the one given to him by Hank Morrison after the Morrison Center project in 2004. Gerald kept that pen in his breast pocket like a medal. He never knew I was the one who landed that client. At church that Sunday, Gerald told the congregation we'd grown apart. He said I couldn't handle his success. People nodded. They'd always seen Gerald at the front of the room and assumed he was the engine. That's how it works when you're the quiet one. People fill in the story themselves. Brenda called me on a Wednesday afternoon. Dear, you should take what Gerald offers. You were lucky to have him. Not every man would have let you help with his business. I listened. I thanked her for calling. Then I pulled up my bank statements and confirmed what I already knew. Brenda's assisted living $4,200 a month had been paid from my personal account for 6 years, not Gerald's mine. It had always been mine. Tiffany didn't waste time. By the second week, she had redecorated my old office at Sellers Construction. New desk white lacquer, $1,200. New chair ergonomic mesh, $800 a brass nameplate on the door. Tiffany Rowan, executive administrator. She started attending client meetings with Gerald, introduced herself as Gerald's partner, wore a cream blazer, and carried a leather portfolio she'd ordered from the same catalog as mine, though she didn't know that. One Tuesday, Dave Kowalski, our head foreman, 25 years with the company, called me at home. Dave is 6'4", built like a bridge piling, and has never once raised his voice. Mrs. Sellers, something's not right here. His voice was low. That woman signed a supply order yesterday. Used Mr. Sellers' gold pen and his authority. She doesn't have signing rights. I know, Dave. She's talking about rebranding dropping Sellers for Gerald Construction. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate you calling. He paused. Ma'am, what do you want me to do? Nothing yet. Just keep working. Craig was no better. He welcomed Tiffany like she'd been promoted. It's good to have fresh energy around here, he told the staff. My son standing in the building I financed, endorsing the woman my husband was paying with company money. Meanwhile, Ruth received a completed forensic accounting report from the CPA she'd hired. $300 an hour, 2 months of work, every receipt traced. Total funds diverted from Sellers Construction to Roan Creative Solutions, LLC, $187,423 over 14 months, categorized as consultant fees and office supplies. There were no consultants. There were no supplies. Tiffany wanted to throw out my filing cabinet, the one with the operating agreement in the bottom drawer. I almost laughed. I met with Ruth on a Tuesday in her downtown office. She had the files spread across her conference table. Operating agreement, bank documents, forensic report, bond schedule, client list. Ruth is 58. Sharp jaw, reading glasses on a chain, and a habit of tapping her pen on the table when she's thinking. She looked at me over those glasses and said, Fiona, in 22 years of practice, I've never seen someone own this much of their own company and not know it. She paused. Correction, your husband didn't know it. We went through it piece by piece. The operating agreement, 60/40 managing member rights to me. The bank guarantee the company's $1.8 million line of credit, personally guaranteed by me. Gerald's name wasn't on that guarantee. His credit score wouldn't have qualified. The surety bond, this was the lever. Sellers Construction's $8 million bonding capacity. The license to bid on public projects, which made up 70% of revenue, was guaranteed by my personal assets, my house, my retirement account, my credit. The bond renewed every October. Annual renewal required my signature. Every year for 35 years I signed it. Every year, Gerald never noticed. This year's renewal was due October 15th, 3 weeks away. If I didn't sign, the company's bonding capacity dropped to 0. No public projects, no county work, no state contracts, 70% of revenue gone. I also reviewed the client contracts. Most were signed by me as managing member. I had personal relationships with every major client, built over decades of returning calls, solving problems, and delivering on time. I wrote a letter to Hank Morrison, careful, professional, factual. I informed him I was stepping back from the company and suggested he review his contract terms. 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks until the bond renewal, and I had 35 years of receipts. Gerald's attorney sent a letter the next week. Gerald wanted to buy out what he called Fiona's minority interest in the company. The offer, $200,000. $200,000 for 60% of a $12 million company. That's $7.2 million on paper. Gerald was offering less than 3 cents on the dollar. Craig called me that same afternoon. Mom, Dad's being generous. Take the $200,000 and move on. Start fresh. Craig, have you read the operating agreement? The what? The operating agreement. The founding legal document of Sellers Construction, LLC. The document that defines who owns what. Mom, Dad runs the company. Everyone knows that. Craig, I love you. But you should read the operating agreement before you tell me what I'm worth. He laughed. I didn't. Gerald filed a motion in court to freeze me out of company decisions, claiming I was not involved in operations. His attorney argued that Fiona Sellers was a passive investor with no operational role. Passive? 35 years of signing every contract, managing every dollar, securing every bond. Passive. That Saturday, Gerald threw a company barbecue at the model home. Burgers, beer, a DJ, playing country music in the yard. He introduced Tiffany to the staff as the new face of Sellers Construction. Tiffany wore a sundress and handed out business cards she'd had printed. Tiffany Rowan, executive partner. Dave Kowalski didn't attend. Neither did 4 other senior employees who'd been with the company since the 90s. They remembered who called them when their kids were sick, who approved their overtime, who signed their Christmas bonuses. Gerald didn't notice who was missing. He never did. Nora drove 2 hours from Charlottesville on a Saturday afternoon. She brought groceries, chicken rice, green beans, a bottle of white wine. She made dinner in my kitchen while I sat at the table, and she didn't ask me how I was feeling, which I appreciated. She just cooked. After dinner, she set down her fork and looked at me. Mom, Craig keeps saying Dad built the company. Is that true? I didn't answer directly. I said, Nora, when you were 12, who drove to the bonding office at midnight to file the paperwork that kept the Harrison Bridge project alive. You did. And who got the credit at the company dinner? She was quiet for a long time. Dad. And when the bank called at 6:00 in the morning because the quarterly payment was short, who answered? You. And who played golf with the clients the next day and told them everything was under control? Dad. I didn't push further. I cleared the plates, Nora dried them. We stood side by side at the sink like we had 1,000 times before, and she was quiet and I let her be. She called Craig the next morning. I know because she told me later. Have you actually looked at the company documents? She asked him. Nora, stay out of it. This is business. It's family, Craig. Same thing. Nora left at 9:00 that night. She hugged me at the door hard the way she used to when she was a girl and didn't want to go to school. Then she said something I didn't expect. Mom, where do you keep the company papers? I told her. Bottom drawer tan filing cabinet. The bond renewal was 2 weeks away. Gerald still thought he'd won. Gerald told Craig to handle your mother. Those were his words, handle. Like I was a customer complaint. Like I was a line item to be resolved. Craig called me every day that week. Monday. Mom, the offer's fair. Take it. Tuesday. Mom, don't drag this out. Wednesday. Mom, think about the grandkids. Thursday, he didn't call. He texted. Dad says this is his final offer. Brenda sent a handwritten note. Palmer Stationery blue ink, the same careful cursive she'd used to write Gerald's excuse notes in grade school. A good wife doesn't make her husband look foolish. Take what Gerald offers and keep your dignity dear. I put the note in the file. Ruth would want it. Gerald changed the locks on my old office at the company. My nameplate, the one that said Fiona Sellers Managing Member, was in the dumpster behind the building. Dave fished it out and brought it to me in a paper bag. I put it on the shelf in my home office next to the filing cabinet. On Saturday evening, Gerald posted a photo on Facebook. Him and Tiffany Craig and his wife, the grandkids, on the couch. Caption new chapter, #blessed. 412 likes. The community responded the way communities do. They sided with the person they could see. Gerald was the face. Gerald was the handshake. Gerald was the one who showed up to Rotary and bought a round at the pub. I was the woman behind the desk invisible. My friend Diane called. Fiona, I saw the post. Are you okay? I'm busy. Diane, I'll call you after October. After October. After October. She didn't know what that meant, but I did. And in 12 days, so would Gerald. Tiffany's biggest mistake wasn't sleeping with my husband. Her biggest mistake was thinking authority came from proximity. 3 weeks after Gerald left me, Tiffany signed a $340,000 materials order with Pacific Supply. She used Gerald's name. She printed executive partner under her signature. The purchase order went to accounting. What was left of accounting now that I was gone? And someone processed it without checking. Then she sent a company-wide email. I have it saved. I printed it and put it in the file like everything else. Exciting changes ahead. As Gerald's partner in life and business, I'm thrilled to announce a new direction for the company. Fresh branding, new energy, a bold vision. Stay tuned for the Gerald Construction rebrand launch on November 5th. Gerald Construction. She was renaming my company, the company I financed with my credit. Bonded with my assets and built with 35 years of midnight phone calls and 6 a.m. spreadsheets. Dave forwarded me the email within 4 minutes. Mrs. Sellers, you need to see this. I read it twice. Then I opened the operating agreement. Section 5.3. No member or employee shall enter into contracts exceeding $50,000 without written approval of the managing member. That was me. Section 8.1 Company name branding and public-facing identity may only be altered by unanimous vote of all members. Gerald hadn't voted. I certainly hadn't. Every unauthorized action Tiffany took, every supply order, every email, every business card she printed was another breach of the operating agreement, another line in Ruth's file, another exhibit for the judge. I printed the email, added it to the folder. Ruth would need it, and Tiffany would learn soon enough that exciting changes required the signature of the majority owner. Now, I want to pause here because what I'm about to tell you changed everything. If you've ever been the one holding things together while someone else took the credit, I need you to drop a comment right now. I was the foundation, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Let me take you back. 1996. Our first big project, a strip mall in Henrico County, $2.1 million. Gerald bid it too low. He came home white-faced and said we'd lose $40,000 on materials alone. I sat at the kitchen table that night, reworked the numbers until 2 o'clock in the morning, found the margin, and drove to the bonding office the next day to increase our surety. The bond officer wouldn't deal with Gerald. His credit was too thin. I signed the personal guarantee. My name, my risk. Gerald got the plaque on the wall. 2003. Gerald wanted to expand into commercial work. Bigger projects, bigger bids. The bank said no to Gerald. His personal financials were a mess. I walked into First National with my tax returns, my credit report, and a 60-page business plan. They approved $1.2 million. My signature on the loan. Gerald's name on the sign out front. 2011. The Harrison Bridge Project. $2.8 million, the biggest contract in company history. Gerald overcommitted equipment to 3 jobs at once. We were hemorrhaging money. I renegotiated the subcontractor agreements, restructured the draw schedule, and managed the budget day by day for 14 months. We finished on time under budget. Gerald gave a speech at the completion dinner, thanked his incredible team. I was sitting in the back row. Every loan, every bond, every contract that built Sellers Construction to a $12 million company. My signature is on them, not Gerald's mine. 35 years of building and not one plaque with my name. Hank Morrison called on a Thursday afternoon. His voice was the same one I'd heard for 22 years, gravel in Virginia drawl direct as a plumb line. Fiona, I got your letter. Sat with it a couple days before calling because I wanted to think before I talked, which is more than most people do. I appreciate that, Hank. I want you to know something. I've been doing business with Sellers Construction for 22 years, and I've been doing business with you specifically for 22 years. The day I signed that first contract, it was because you sent me a project estimate that was detailed to the penny. Gerald took me to lunch. You sent me numbers I could trust. Thank you. Last week, Gerald called, took me to lunch again, brought that woman the secretary, Tiffany. He introduced her as his partner at a business lunch. I shook her hand, smiled, and spent the whole drive home thinking about you. I was quiet. Fiona, what's really going on, Hank? I'll know more after October 15th. He paused. Hank Morrison was a man who understood calendars. 22 years in development. He knew what October meant for bonding. October 15th, he repeated. That's the bond renewal. Yes, Fiona, whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere, but I need to know. Am I doing business with Gerald's company, or was I always doing business with yours? Read your contract, Hank. Look at who signed it. He was quiet for 5 seconds. I'll be in touch. I hung up, set the phone on the table, looked at the calendar on the wall. October 15th, 9 days away, and Gerald still hadn't read a single document. Nora came while I was at Ruth's office. She told me later, step by step, the way I taught her to tell a story with details in order, leaving nothing out. She used her key, walked through the kitchen, down the hall to the home office. The room was the same as always. My desk against the window, the printer in the corner, and the tan metal filing cabinet standing against the wall like it had stood for 35 years. She opened the bottom drawer. It slid out smooth on its runners the way it always did because I oiled them once a year. Inside, a brown expanding file labeled in my handwriting, Sellers Construction LLC formation documents. Nora pulled out the operating agreement, 32 pages dated March 14th, 1994. She turned to page 4, section 3.1. Member ownership interests, Fiona M. Sellers 60%, Gerald R. Sellers 40%. Her hand shook. She kept reading. Section 7.2. No transfer of membership interest shall be valid without written consent of the majority member. Section 9.1. The managing member, Fiona M. Sellers, shall have sole authority over financial instruments, banking relationships, and bonding agreements. She called me at Ruth's office. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. Mom? Her voice was thin. I read it. I read all of it. I know, sweetheart. Dad doesn't own this company you do. I built it, Nora. I just let him think it was his because I loved him. Does Craig know? Craig never asked. She was crying quietly the way I cry without sound, just breathing. Mom, why didn't you ever say anything? I leaned against the hallway wall, closed my eyes because I thought love meant they'd notice. She didn't say anything for a long time, then I noticed, Mom, I notice now. I thanked her. I went back into Ruth's office and I kept planning. Nora called Craig that evening. I wasn't on the line, but Nora told me every word, and Nora doesn't paraphrase. She quotes, Craig, have you read the operating agreement? What operating agreement? The founding legal document of the company you work for. The one that says who owns what. Nora, Dad runs the company. Mom owns 60%, it's in writing. It's been in the filing cabinet for 35 years. Craig laughed. I'm told it was a long laugh, dismissive, the kind Gerald does when someone questions him. Craig learned it young. That's ridiculous. Mom was the bookkeeper. She was the majority owner, the managing member, and the personal guarantor for every bond the company has. Nora, you don't understand business. Craig, you're the VP of sales and you've never read your own company's founding document. Who doesn't understand business? He hung up, called Gerald. Gerald told him what Gerald tells everyone. Your mother put her name on some things early on. Doesn't mean anything. It's just administrative. Craig called Nora back, relieved. Dad says it's just paperwork. Nora's voice went flat. Craig, it's a legally binding operating agreement filed with the state of Virginia. Just paperwork is how you lose everything. Nora, you're a school teacher. You don't... I understand how reading works, Craig. Try it. She hung up. Craig didn't read it. Gerald didn't read it. They had 35 years to open that filing cabinet. They had 2 direct warnings in 2 days, and still they decided the woman who wrote it was just the bookkeeper, the woman who signed every bond, the woman who guaranteed every dollar. Don't make it messy, Craig had said. The mess was already made. He just didn't look. October 15th, a Wednesday. Overcast. The kind of fall morning in Virginia where the light comes through flat and gray and everything looks like a photograph. The bond renewal paperwork arrived at my home address as it had every year for 35 years. As managing member, I was the point of contact. The envelope was from Commonwealth Surety Group. Standard renewal, standard form, a signature line at the bottom with my name pre-printed. Fiona M. Sellers, personal guarantor. For 35 years, I had signed that form without hesitation, sealed the envelope, mailed it back, and the company kept its $8 million bonding capacity for another year. Gerald never saw the form. Gerald didn't know what bonding capacity was, not really. He just knew the company could bid on government projects, and he assumed that happened by itself the way he assumed everything happened by itself. I picked up a pen. Not Gerald's gold pen, a regular blue Bic from the cup on my desk. I looked at the form for a long time, then I set the pen down. I picked up the phone. Commonwealth Surety Group, how may I direct your call? This is Fiona Sellers. I will not be renewing the surety bond for Sellers Construction, LLC. Silence on the other end. Then, Mrs. Sellers, you understand this means the company loses bonding capacity. Effective November 1st, I understand. You'll need to submit written confirmation. I'll have it in your office by Friday. I hung up, called the bank next, spoke to the commercial lending officer. Mrs. Sellers, without your personal guarantee, will need to review the company's credit standing. Mr. Sellers doesn't... He paused. He doesn't qualify on his own. I know. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I picked up that blue Bic pen and I didn't sign. That was all it took. While I was pulling the foundation out from under him, Gerald was redecorating. He and Tiffany had set November 5th for the grand rebrand launch. New name, Gerald Construction. Built on excellence. Tiffany had designed the logo herself. She used Canva, which tells you everything you need to know. New business cards, new letterhead, new sign for the building. Gerald told Craig over lunch, once the divorce goes through, I'll buy out your mother's little share and we'll be free. Clean slate, new brand you as CEO. Craig ordered a nameplate custom brass, Craig Sellers, Chief Executive Officer. He kept it in his desk drawer waiting. Gerald bid on a $3.8 million county courthouse renovation. Public project required bonding. He submitted the bid on October 20th, 5 days after I declined the bond renewal. He didn't check. He never checked. I learned afterward that Hank Morrison had also called 2 other clients, Don Jameson at Jameson Properties and the county school board procurement officer, and mentioned casually that Fiona Sellers was no longer with the company. Gerald didn't know that 3 of his longest-serving employees had updated their resumes, or that Dave Kowalski had been coordinating with me by text message every evening, keeping me informed about operations. Gerald was building castles in November while I was removing the ground in October. He'd come home to the model house every night, pour a bourbon and tell Tiffany about the future, the rebrand, the courthouse project, Craig as CEO. Tiffany would smile and pour herself a glass of wine. I learned later she'd already picked out countertops for a kitchen renovation. He was ordering new business cards. I was dismantling his entire financial foundation. November 1st, the letter arrived at Sellers Construction on a Friday morning in a standard white envelope from Commonwealth Surety Group. Gerald's assistant opened it because Gerald never opened his own mail. She read it twice. Then she walked it into Gerald's office without saying a word and placed it on his desk. Surety bond, not renewed effective November 1st. Bonding capacity $0. Contact your local agent for reinstatement options. Gerald called the bonding company at 9:15. I know the time because Dave was listening from the hallway. There must be a mistake. No mistake, Mr. Sellers. The personal guarantor, Mrs. Fiona Sellers, declined to renew. She can't do that. Sir, the guarantee is personal and voluntary. Mrs. Sellers is within her rights. He hung up, called his attorney. I imagine that conversation went poorly because 40 minutes later, Gerald was standing in Craig's office with the veins in his neck showing. She pulled the bond. Craig looked up from his computer. What does that mean? It means we can't bid on any bonded project. Craig went pale. That's 70% of our work. Call your mother. Fix this. Craig called me. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I was at Ruth's office reviewing the board meeting agenda. My phone was face down on the table. I could see Craig's name lighting up the screen through the glass. Ruth glanced at it. Your son. My son. You going to answer? Not today. That was the first domino. Gerald thought it was the only one. He spent the weekend calling bonding companies, calling banks, calling anyone who might guarantee $8 million on behalf of a man whose wife had just walked away. Nobody said yes. Gerald's attorney filed an emergency motion on Monday morning. The argument Fiona Sellers was acting in bad faith by withdrawing her personal guarantee in order to damage the company during divorce proceedings. He wanted a judge to force me to reinstate the bond. Ruth was ready. She filed a response that afternoon attached the operating agreement. Gerald's attorney read it in his office. I wasn't there, but Ruth told me later that she received a phone call from opposing counsel at 4:17 p.m. He sounded, she said, like a man who just realized he'd been building his case on quicksand. He called Gerald. Gerald, we need to talk about this operating agreement. What about it? Your wife owns 60% of the company. That's impossible. I built that company. You signed this document in 1994. Page 4, section 3.1 clearly states I didn't read it. She told me to sign things and I signed them. Gerald, that's not a defense. The motion was withdrawn the next morning. You can't force someone to personally guarantee debt for a company they majority own when they're exercising their rights under the operating agreement. Ruth had explained this to me on day 1. I'd been waiting 6 months for Gerald's attorney to catch up. Gerald drove home that afternoon. Not to the model house with Tiffany to our house. My house. He went to the home office, opened the filing cabinet bottom drawer. He pulled out the operating agreement. 32 pages, dated March 14th, 1994. His signature on the last page, the same loose, confident scrawl he used for everything he didn't bother to read. Page 4, section 3.1, Fiona M. Sellers, 60%. He sat on the floor of that office, the filing cabinet still open behind him. 35 years. It had been right there for 35 years. Hank Morrison called Gerald on a Tuesday. I didn't hear the conversation, but Hank told me later word for word because Hank Morrison is the kind of man who remembers everything he says and means all of it. Gerald, I've enjoyed working with your company for 22 years, but my contract is with Fiona Sellers as managing member. Without her, I need to protect my projects. Hank, we can work this out. Have lunch. Let me explain. Gerald, I've always liked you. But Fiona is the reason I stayed. My buildings got finished on time because of her. My budget's held because of her. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting my investment. Hank formally pulled $2.4 million in annual contracts. 30-day notice per contract terms. Within a week, 2 more followed. Don Jameson at Jameson Properties, $800,000. The county school board, $1.1 million. Both cited the same reason. Their contracts were with the managing member. The managing member was gone. Total client exodus, $4.3 million in annual revenue. Gone in 10 days. Gerald's remaining revenue and approximately $2.8 million wasn't enough to cover payroll for 60 employees, plus insurance materials, equipment leases, and the mortgage on the office building. At the office, Tiffany overheard Gerald on the phone losing the Jameson account. She stood in the doorway of my old office, her office now, and watched him pace and shout and promise things he couldn't deliver. That evening, Tiffany opened her laptop and Googled Sellers Construction net worth. Then she Googled Sellers Construction LLC ownership. Then she closed the laptop and sat very still. Gerald's gold pen was sitting on the corner of her desk. She picked it up, looked at it, and set it back down. She stopped using it after that. Craig opened the books for the first time in his career on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 days after Hank pulled his contracts. Payroll was due Friday biweekly, $340,000. The company account had $280,000, $60,000 short. He sat in the accounting office, my old office, before Tiffany redecorated it, and scrolled through 35 years of records. Every line item, every tax payment, every insurance renewal, every bond submission, every payroll run. My handwriting in the margins, my initials on every approval, my system, my organization, my work. He called me at 7 o'clock that evening. His voice was different. The salesman confidence was gone. He sounded like a boy who'd broken something expensive and couldn't fix it. "Mom, you need to come back. The company can't make payroll." "Craig, I don't work there anymore. Your father made that clear." "Mom, 60 people are going to lose their jobs." "Then maybe your father should have read the operating agreement before he called me just the bookkeeper." "Mom, please." "Craig, you told me not to make it messy. I'm not making it messy. I'm simply not cleaning it up anymore." The line was quiet. I could hear him breathing. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't know any of this." "I know you didn't, Craig. That's the point." He hung up. I set the phone down, made myself a cup of tea. Chamomile sat in the kitchen and drank it slowly. Craig went back to his office. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. The brass nameplate was still there. Craig Sellers, Chief Executive Officer. He picked it up, looked at it for a long time, and put it back. Closed the drawer, locked it. "I'm simply not cleaning it up anymore." That was the truth. I'd been cleaning up after Gerald for 35 years. I was done. I know some of you are sitting there thinking, "Fiona, please tell me you had a plan." I did. I want you to subscribe and keep listening. Because what happened on that Friday, nobody saw it coming. Not Gerald, not Craig, not Tiffany, not one of them. Thursday morning, I went to my home office. The tan filing cabinet was waiting in the corner, same as always. I opened the bottom drawer and removed the operating agreement. Then I pulled out the rest, the original bank loan documents from 1994, the surety bond history, 35 years of signed contracts, the forensic accounting report. I placed everything in a brown leather portfolio. The same portfolio I carried into First National Bank in 1994 when I was 32 years old and convinced a loan officer to hand me $2 million. Gerald wasn't at that meeting. He was at a job site eating a sandwich in his truck, waiting for me to call and say we got the money. I called. He celebrated. He never asked how. I drove to Ruth's office. We spent 3 hours preparing. Ruth filed notice of a special meeting of Sellers Construction LLC members. The notice was required under Section 11.2 of the operating agreement. The managing member could call a special meeting with 48 hours notice. We'd given 72. Purpose as stated in the filing review of operating agreement compliance financial audit and membership decisions. The notice was sent to Gerald Sellers, 40% member, and copied to Craig Sellers, employee. Gerald received it Thursday evening. He called Craig immediately. "What the hell is a special meeting of members?" Craig's voice was barely a whisper. "Dad, I think Mom is calling a board meeting. She can't do that. Dad, she's the managing member." I looked it up. She can. The meeting was set for Friday, 10 a.m., and 6 hours after that, the payroll email would go out to 60 employees. Gerald showed up at my door Thursday night at 8:45. I know the time because I checked the clock on the microwave before I answered. Old habits. He looked smaller, That's the only way I can describe it. Gerald Sellers, 6'2". Broad shoulders, the man who filled every room he entered. He looked like he'd lost 2 inches. His shirt was untucked. His jaw was working the way it does when he's trying not to shout. I opened the door. I did not invite him in. Fiona, we need to talk. Call off this meeting. The meeting is at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Gerald. You're welcome to attend. You're a 40% member. Fiona, this is my company. Gerald, I spent 35 years letting you say that. I'm not going to argue with you tonight. If you do this, you'll destroy everything I built. I looked at him standing on the porch of the house my credit score bought the porch light, casting shadows under his eyes. You destroyed us 6 months ago with $187,000 in fake consultant invoices paid to your girlfriend. I'm just filing the paperwork. The color left his face, all of it, like someone had pulled a plug. How do you... I'm an accountant, Gerald. It's what I do. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, walked back to the kitchen. Through the window, I could see his truck in the driveway. He sat there for 45 minutes, engine off, headlights off. Just sitting, staring at the house he hadn't lived in for 3 months and didn't own. His phone lit up in the cab, Brenda calling. I know because he answered and I could hear him through the open window. Mom, I think I'm in trouble. Don't be silly, Gerald. She's just a bookkeeper. He hung up, sat there a while longer, then he drove away. Friday, 7 a.m. I stood in front of my closet and put on the navy blazer, the same one I wore to every bank meeting, every bond hearing, every contract negotiation for 35 years. Pressed white blouse, gray trousers, low heels, my reading glasses in the breast pocket. I picked up the brown leather portfolio from the dining room table, checked the contents one more time. Operating agreement, forensic accounting report, bank correspondence, client, notification letters, bond renewal records. Everything organized by tab, everything in order. That's how I work. That's how I've always worked. I drove to the Sellers construction office for the first time in 3 months. The building sat on Route 1 south of Richmond. I parked in the visitor lot, not the reserved spot that used to have my name on it. Gerald had painted over it. I looked up at the sign, gold letters 6 feet tall, lit from below. Sellers Construction. Gerald's name on the building, my name on every document inside it. I walked through the front door, past the reception desk, past Tiffany's office. The nameplate still read Executive Administrator. Tiffany was at her desk. She stared at me over her coffee cup. I nodded. Good morning, Tiffany. She didn't respond. I went to the conference room, set up the portfolio, laid out the documents. At 9:45, Gerald arrived with his attorney, a man named Phil Dexter, who charged $350 an hour and had clearly been briefed overnight. Craig was already there, sitting in the corner, sweating through his Oxford shirt. Tiffany tried to follow Gerald in. Ruth, standing by the door, stopped her. This meeting is for LLC members and their counsel only. You're an employee, Ms. Rowan. Gerald, tell them I'm your partner. Gerald didn't look at her. Tiffany, wait outside. Her face cracked just a little, just enough. The payroll email was 6 hours away. The company account had $280,000. Payroll was 340.100 a.m. The conference room at Sellers Construction. Gerald and Phil Dexter on one side. Craig at the end of the table, trying to disappear. Fiona and Ruth on the other side. Ruth opened a leather binder. Her voice was steady professional the way mine is. This is a special meeting of Sellers Construction, LLC, called by the managing member and majority owner, Fiona Sellers, pursuant to Section 11.2 of the operating agreement. Phil Dexter cut in immediately. We dispute the characterization of majority owner, our client. Ruth placed the operating agreement on the table, opened it to page 4, turned it to face Phil. Section 3.1. Phil read it. His mouth opened slightly, then he closed it, then he closed his eyes. Ruth waited 3 seconds. Shall we proceed? Gerald leaned forward. That document is 35 years old. It doesn't... And it's never been amended. Ruth's voice didn't rise. Because amending it requires the written consent of the majority member. That's Mrs. Sellers. No amendment has ever been proposed, requested, or executed. This is the current binding operating agreement of a Sellers Construction LLC. Gerald looked at me. For the first time in 35 years of marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. I met his gaze steady calm the way I've looked at every banker, every bonding agent, every client, every subcontractor who ever sat across the table from me. I didn't hide anything, Gerald. You just never looked. The filing cabinet document on the table, Gerald's gold pen in his jacket pocket, the payroll clock counting down. Ruth went through the documents one at a time. She was methodical. She was thorough. She was earning every dollar of her $450 an hour. Document 1. The LLC operating agreement executed March 14, 1994. Ownership, Fiona M. Sellers 60%. Gerald R. Sellers 40%. Managing member Fiona M. Sellers. She placed it on the table. Gerald stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. Document 2. Personal guarantee for the company's $1.8 million line of credit at First National Bank. Guarantor, Fiona M. Sellers. Notice of withdrawal filed October 16th. The bank is reviewing Mr. Sellers' independent credit standing. She paused. He does not qualify. Document 3. Surety bond history. All bonding for Sellers Construction LLC, $8 million in capacity has been personally guaranteed by Fiona M. Sellers since 1994. Renewal declined October 15th. Current bonding capacity 0. Document 4. Client contracts. 78% of active contracts were signed by Mrs. Sellers as managing member. As of this week, clients representing $4.3 million in annual revenue have provided notice of withdrawal. Document 5. Ruth held this one up. Forensic accounting report prepared by Denton & Associates, certified forensic accountants. Findings $187,423 diverted from Sellers Construction, LLC, to Rowan Creative Solutions, LLC, an entity owned by Tiffany Rowan over 14 months categorized as consultant fees and office supplies. No corresponding services were rendered. The room was silent. Craig's face was gray. He turned to Gerald. Dad, you told me Mom had a small piece. You said it didn't mean anything. Gerald stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. This is her doing this. She's trying to destroy what I built. I stayed seated. Gerald was standing, pointing, shouting. I've noticed that the person standing is usually the one losing. My name is on every document inside it. Gerald slammed both palms on the conference table. The water glasses shook. Phil Dexter put a hand on Gerald's arm. Gerald pulled away. You set me up. You've been planning this for 35 years. I folded my hands on the table. I set up the company, Gerald. That's different. I structured it to protect the person with the most financial exposure. That was always me. You were supposed to support me. That was the deal. The deal is on page 4 of the document you never read. He turned to Craig, desperate now. Say something. Do something. Craig looked at his father, then at me, then at the forensic report on the table. Dad, she owns 60% and you stole $187,000 to give to your girlfriend. What do you want me to say? It wasn't stealing. It was... Dad, stop. Gerald stopped. He stood in the middle of the conference room. The same room where I'd served coffee at every client meeting for 35 years, and he looked around at the table at the framed photo on the wall from our first completed project, 1996. Gerald in front, holding a shovel, me in the background, holding the blueprint. Something shifted in his face. For 1 second, I saw recognition, not remorse. Recognition like a man looking at a painting he'd walked past every day and finally seeing what it actually depicted. Then it passed. My mother was right about you. He grabbed his coat from the back of the chair and walked out. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut softly, which was worse. Phil Dexter gathered his papers, nodded at Ruth, and followed. No apology, no admission, just Gerald being Gerald all the way to the end. The gold pen was still in his jacket pocket. He'd never know I was the one who landed the client who gave it to him. The conference room was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something breaks. Not a crash, but a slow giving way like a foundation settling for the last time. Craig sat across from me. His tie was loose. His hands were flat on the table. "Mom?" He swallowed. "I said Dad has the money." "You did." "I was wrong." "You weren't wrong because you were cruel, Craig. You were wrong because you never looked. I'll give you a moment." She gathered her files and stepped out, closing the door behind her. Mother and son, alone in the conference room of the company I built, and he never understood. "What happens to the 60 employees?" he asked. "I've already spoken with 3 contractors who can absorb the current projects and retain most of the crew. Dave knows. He's been helping me coordinate for 2 weeks. Craig stared at me. "You planned for the employees, Craig." "I always planned for the employees. That was my job. It was always my job." He put his head in his hands. He didn't make a sound. His shoulders moved and he breathed unevenly, but he didn't make a sound. "That's the seller's way, I suppose. We break quietly. I didn't comfort him. I didn't reach across the table. I sat with him, and that was enough. "Don't make it messy," he'd said 6 months ago at my kitchen table. It wasn't messy. It was precise. It was 35 years of precision. 35 years of keeping every receipt, filing every document, reading every contract. The most organized dismantling in the history of Sellers construction. 3 o'clock. The payroll email went out to 60 employees. Automated, same as every other Friday. But this Friday, the account was short. $60,000 short. Every employee saw it. Monday morning, the courthouse renovation bid $3.8 million. Gerald's crown jewel was rejected. Reason: no bonding capacity. Gerald's name was on the bid. My name was supposed to be on the bond. It wasn't. The bank called at 9 a.m. Without my personal guarantee, the $1.8 million line of credit was frozen pending review. Gerald's personal credit score, 640. The minimum threshold for a guarantee of that size, 720. Insufficient. 3 more clients called that week. They all asked the same question: "Where's Fiona?" Gerald didn't have an answer they wanted to hear. Tiffany showed up at the office on Tuesday. She didn't go to her desk. She went to the supply closet, got a box, and packed her things. Makeup bag, photo frames, the nameplate that said Executive Administrator. She left Gerald's gold pen on the corner of the desk. Didn't take it. Didn't say goodbye to Gerald. Just walked out to her car, loaded the box in the trunk, and drove to her apartment. She was gone by lunch. She'd calculated her investment and decided it was a loss. Smart woman. Wrong investment. Dave sent a company-wide email that afternoon. "For those asking, Mrs. Sellers has arranged transition plans for all current projects. Details and individual meetings this week." 60 employees forwarded it to each other. The narrative shifted. Wait. She built this. The local paper ran a story in the business section. Sellers construction faces. Financial shakeup after ownership dispute. Gerald sat in his truck in the company parking lot that evening. Engine off, staring at the building with his name in gold letters. Craig told me later that Gerald called Brenda from the parking lot that night. Gerald just apologized to her. Women like to hear sorry. Mom. She owns the company. She always did. That's ridiculous. She was just the bookkeeper. Some people never learn. They just get louder. I'd like to tell you, Gerald called me that night, that he sat at the kitchen table and said he was sorry and that he understood. But Gerald is Gerald. He sat in his truck in the empty parking lot until dark. I know because Dave saw him on the security camera and texted me. Gerald wasn't doing anything, just sitting, staring at the building. I think he was remembering 1994, the day I came out of First National Bank carrying the brown leather portfolio, smiling. We got the loan, Gerald. He picked me up and spun me in the parking lot. He said, "We did it." He meant it then. I believe that. He meant we in 1994. I don't know when we became I. When Fiona and Gerald became Gerald. When the woman who secured the loan and wrote the contract and built the system became the bookkeeper. It happened slowly. It happened completely. And Gerald didn't notice because Gerald was never the one paying attention. He drove to a diner on Route 1, ordered coffee, sat alone in a booth by the window. He didn't call me. He didn't apologize. He couldn't. Some people can only see what they've already decided to believe. Brenda didn't bill him for anything else. The divorce was finalized in February. Ruth earned every penny. The settlement. I retained my 60% ownership of Sellers Construction, LLC. Gerald's 40% was valued at $4.8 million on paper, but reduced by the $187,000 in misappropriated funds plus Ruth's legal fees plus the forensic accounting costs. Net to Gerald, $3.1 million on paper, but paper and reality are different things. The company without me, without my bonding capacity, my bank guarantee, my client relationships, my operational management was worth a fraction of its valuation. Gerald couldn't operate it. He couldn't bond projects. He couldn't secure credit. He couldn't retain clients. He sold his 40% stake to a regional contractor out of Norfolk for $1.9 million below market desperate. Craig lost his VP position. No company, no title. He took a sales job at a building supply distributor, $72,000 a year. No company truck, no expense account, no brass nameplate. Tiffany was already in Charlotte. She updated her LinkedIn, removed all references to Sellers Construction, listed her title as independent consultant. She didn't look back. She was never looking at Gerald. She was looking at what she thought Gerald had. Brenda's assisted living bills, $4,200 a month. I continued to pay them. I didn't tell Brenda. I didn't tell Gerald. Some things you do because they're right, not because they'll be noticed. The company that Gerald built was worth $12 million with me and $1.9 million without me. That's not revenge. That's arithmetic. 6 months after the divorce, I leased a small office above a coffee shop on Main Street in downtown Richmond. One room, good lighted desk by the window, no gold letters on the building, just a brass nameplate by the door. Sellers Consulting. I help women business owners structure their companies properly. Operating agreements, ownership documentation, financial protections, the things nobody reads until it's too late. My first client was a woman named Laura, whose husband wanted to push her out of their joint bakery. She sat across from me, hands shaking, and said, "He says I'm just the baker." I opened my brown leather portfolio, took notes, told her to bring me her LLC documents. Nora visits every Sunday. We cook dinner together, usually something simple, chicken and rice, a salad, a glass of wine. We don't talk about Gerald. Craig called once, 6 months after the divorce. The conversation was awkward and short. "Mom, I'm sorry, I should have looked." "I know, Craig. Give yourself time." Dave Kowalski sent flowers on the anniversary of the company's founding. The card said, "To the real builder." I put it on the shelf next to my old nameplate. The tan filing cabinet is in the corner of my new office bottom drawer, the original operating agreement. I keep it not as a trophy, as a reminder. My son told me not to make it messy. He was right about one thing. There was no need for mess. The truth was in the filing cabinet. It had been there for 35 years. I didn't need to scream or cry or beg. I just needed them to finally read what I wrote. I spent 35 years being the foundation, and when the foundation walked away, the building came down. That's not revenge. That's physics. Just don't make it messy. You just never looked. My name is on every document inside it. 3 sentences. 35 years. Here's my boundary, and it's the only one that matters. I don't need anyone to see my work for it to matter. But I will never again let someone build their name on my labor and call it theirs. Not again. Not ever. Late afternoon. My office above the coffee shop. The light comes through the window in long amber stripes across my desk. The tan filing cabinet stands in the corner. The brown leather portfolio sits open beside my keyboard. My phone rings. A new client. Another woman with a story. I pick it up. Sellers Consulting. How can I help you? She starts talking. I listen. I take notes with a blue Bic pen. Nothing gold, nothing flashy, just a pen that works. And I begin. That's my story. 35 years of building. 6 months of planning. 72 hours that changed everything. If this reminded you to read the fine print on your own life, do it today. Share this with a woman who needs to hear it. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.